The void was silent, as it always was, an eternal vacuum of death and cold. Yet in that silence something stirred. Across the expanse of the segmentum obscurus, the auspex arrays of the Mechanicus frigate Ferrum Sanctus began to tremble, their dials whispering error codes in binharic panic. Within the ship's sensorium, red-robed adepts leaned close to glowing runes, eyes like dull augers reflecting ghostly light. What they saw should not have existed, a pulse, rhythmic, like the beating of a colossal heart. Then, faintly, another sound bled through the static. A mechanical roar, alive, furious, and impossibly far. Magos Dervan of the Ferrum Sanctus muttered the litanies of clarity, invoking the Omnissiah's logic against the rising data heresy. A cross-reference anomaly, he ordered, his voice thick with static, a confirm warp fluctuation parameters. The servitors obeyed in mechanical unison. But the readings defied the Emperor's known laws. It was neither demon nor machine, neither signal nor scream. It was something that existed between, a distortion in the immaterium pulsing to the rhythm of blood and metal. Outside, the void darkened. The stars themselves seemed to dim as if retreating from what was coming. From the depths of the warp, a single ember flared, a burning object tearing reality open as it fell. The Mechanicus auger arrays shrieked warnings. A collision trajectory formed, its endpoint, the hive world of Carest Prime. A world already dying beneath its own ash. Prepare planetary relay, Dervan hissed. Abide the Omnissiah, record every waveform. No anomaly escapes the data. The ship's vox burst into a storm of binary prayer, but deep within the signal noise there was something else, a scream. Human, distorted, and echoing words that no one aboard understood. Then, abruptly, the transmission cut. On Carest Prime's surface, night reigned eternal. The hive's upper spires clawed at a polluted sky, their stained glass cathedrals flickering with false light. Among the spire's patrol decks, the planetary defense scanners caught the same object, a meteor burning with red fire, trailing a storm of screaming air as it tore through the upper atmosphere. The impact shook the manufactorum districts, a shockwave of molten dust rippling through the hive's blackened veins. The first responders, enforcers of the local precinct, arrived in convoys of rusted chimeras, their sirens blaring through the storm. They expected wreckage, a fallen ship perhaps. Instead they found a crater filled with molten slag and something else, something breathing. Amidst the smoke, a figure twitched, flesh smoldered, metal glinted, chainsaw blades embedded where arms should be, dripped with sizzling oil. The enforcers hesitated. One aimed a lasgun, by the throne. What is that? The figure's head lifted. The sound that came forth was not human, a single rev low and growling like a demon engine testing its hunger. Sparks flickered from his chest as he gasped for air. Aware? Am I? The man croaked, his voice raw, alien, almost childlike. The enforcer fired instinctively, the lasbolt striking his shoulder and burning flesh. The man screamed, and the roar of the chainsaws erupted in answer. From orbit, Magos Dervan watched the data feed collapse into static. He whispered the rite of diagnostic cleansing, but his voice faltered as the final transmission played. Through the vox distortion came a mechanical roar that did not end. It grew and grew until it devoured all other sound, like the grinding of a god's teeth. Far below in the crater's heart, the figure rose. The smoke swirled around him like a crown. His blood soaked the ash, yet the wounds closed as fast as they opened. His body was broken, his mind fragmented, but something inside him burned brighter than fear. He took a step forward, dragging his chainsaw arm through the dirt, its teeth clattering like bones. The air trembled. Above the hive, the storm thickened. The Mechanicus frigate's sensors flared one last time before dying completely. The Magos stared at the void readings, trembling. It cannot be, he whispered. In the silence that followed, the sound returned, distant, rhythmic, and relentless, a single engine growling in the dark. The crater still burned days after impact. Carest Prime's atmosphere had turned to rust, and the rain that fell was black and bitter, carrying the taste of oil and blood. Around the impact zone, Imperial Guard cordons stood in solemn silence, their auspex readings screaming contradictions. The crater's center pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of a slumbering god. Every attempt to approach it ended in failure. Machines stalled, vox units screamed, and men lost their minds. When the Inquisition arrived, the planet itself seemed to exhale. A gunmetal gray cruiser, St. Judicant, entered low orbit, its vast silhouette blotting out the stars. The seal of the Ordo Malleus burned red across its hull. Inquisitor Coldrain descended with a retinue of stormtroopers, psychers, and a single sanctioned astropath whose face was bandaged against visions. The Inquisitor's boots sank into the ash as he surveyed the crater below, the smell of scorched ozone thick in the air. "Containment protocols Alpha through Delta," he commanded. "We are standing upon the mouth of the warp itself." At his signal, servo skulls drifted down, their optics glowing pale blue as they scanned the pit. Through their lenses, Coldrain saw movement. A figure slumped against the edge of molten stone, steam rising from its body. It was not a demon, not entirely human either. The thing's skin was lacerated with metallic veins, its limbs were heavy, fused with saw-bladed machinery that still dripped molten residue. The Inquisitor frowned. "By the Emperor's light, what are you?" The stormtroopers descended carefully, mag boots locking on fractured metal. As they neared, the figure stirred. A rasping sound came from its chest, followed by a low, shuddering breath. The soldiers aimed their hellguns, fingers tense. "Stay down," one shouted. The figure lifted its head slowly, revealing eyes that flickered with red light like embers buried in coal. His voice cracked. "Is this hell?" A psychic tremor rippled through the air. The astropath convulsed, reaming words from no tongue known to man. The Inquisitor fired his bolt pistol into the sky, shouting the catechism of binding as his retinue seized the twitching figure. Denji's body resisted, trembling as chainsaw teeth scraped against the restraints. They injected him with null serums, wrapped him in hexed bindings, and carried him into containment. Aboard the St. Judicant, the interrogation began. Denji sat in a circle of null rods, his head bowed, arms bound in electro-purity chains. Coldrain watched from behind reinforced glass, his expression one of both curiosity and dread. "You claim no allegiance to chaos," he said. "Yet your flesh rejects the Emperor's touch. You are a paradox of blood and machine. Explain." Denji blinked slowly, his voice hoarse. "I was a man once. I had a friend. He had a chainsaw for a face. We made a deal." His words faltered. "Then everything went dark. I woke up here." Coldrain exchanged glances with his chief psyker, whose face was pale as ash. "The warp clings to him," she whispered, "but not as corruption. It recoils from him as if afraid." Intrigued, the Inquisitor ordered a deeper examination. Servo skulls cut samples of Denji's tissue. The data screamed nonsense, regenerative capability beyond any sanctioned science, energy readings closer to demon than man. Yet there was no trace of chaos taint. His essence was something else entirely, an anomaly neither divine nor damned. Days passed. Denji's wounds sealed without prayer. He ate ravenously, laughed at nothing, and spoke little of his past. When Coldrain pressed him for details, he spoke of devils, creatures of fear, blood, and desire. The psychers flinched at the word, for its resonance in the immaterium caused lights to flicker and circuits to weep oil. "A devils," Coldrain murmured, testing the word. "Not demons." Denji shook his head weakly. "Demons, devils, maybe they're cousins." Outside the cell, Mechanicus adepts whispered about harnessing his physiology for study. Coldrain silenced them with a glance. This creature fell from the stars, wrapped in fire and warp storm. It may not be man's to dissect, but the warp was not silent. Through the astropath's broken mind came whispers, distant laughter, the grind of unseen blades. Something beyond reality was watching, waiting, curious. The psyker scrawled words in his blood before dying in his sleep. "The hunger that hunts hunger itself has awakened." Coldrain stood in the observation chamber, staring at the sleeping figure within. The hum of the ship's engines felt synchronized with the slow, steady thrum of Denji's heart. It was as if both man and vessel shared a rhythm born from the same unknowable source. "Whatever you are," the Inquisitor whispered, "you do not belong to the stars or the warp." In the silence, Denji's lips moved. For a moment, the Inquisitor thought he heard it again, that sound, faint but unmistakable, the distant growl of an engine revving in the dark. The chamber lights dimmed as Denji awoke once more, his breath fogging the reinforced glass of his containment cell. The hum of the ship surrounded him like a lullaby of iron, mechanical, constant, and yet oddly human. His body ached, but the wounds he remembered from the crater were gone. His flesh had mended perfectly, leaving no scar, no mark of suffering. The same could not be said of the men who had brought him aboard. He could still hear their whispers beyond the walls, fragments of fear dressed in ritual phrases. Inquisitor Coldrain stood behind the observation pane, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. The data scribes reported the same anomaly again and again. Denji's life signs fluctuated between human and something unclassified. His heart sometimes stopped for seconds. yet his body continued to breathe. His temperature dropped to freezing, then rose to infernal levels, his blood evaporating before reforming as though reality itself refused to settle on what he was. When Coldrain entered the chamber, Denji looked up, his eyes still faintly red, the kind of red that was not reflection but inner light. The Inquisitor's voice was calm but edged with command. "You are an anomaly, Denji. We have encountered demons, psychers and mutants, but nothing like you. You regenerate as if your own death refuses to occur." Denji smirked faintly, the first expression of emotion since his capture. "Yeah," he rasped. "I've died a lot. Guess it doesn't stick." Coldrain's gaze did not soften. "Do you know what power sustains you?" Denji hesitated. The words felt heavy, too human for the thing he had become. "It's not power," he said slowly. "It's a deal. I made one with my best friend. His name was Pochita. He was a devil. When I died, he became my heart." His hand pressed to his chest unconsciously, and a faint, rhythmic sound echoed, Burman like a distant engine turning once. The psycho attendants stiffened. Warp sensors flared red across the control room. A surge of psychic interference rippled through the deck, enough to extinguish half the lumen globes. Coldrain raised his hand in warning but did not retreat. A devil. Interesting word. Our lexicon knows demons, warp entities, never devil. Perhaps you speak of the same thing with a different tongue. Denji frowned, confused but unafraid. Demons, devils, they're all monsters that feed on fear, right? I kill them. That's what I do. The Inquisitor studied him for a long time. And what happens when there is no fear left? Denji laughed low and tired. There's always fear. People never run out. Silence settled, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of cogitators and the faint hiss of Denji's breathing. The Inquisitor motioned toward a servo skull, which drifted closer and projected a hollow image, flickering scenes from Karist Prime. Bodies torn apart by unseen blades, machinery melted into meat, a crater still burning with warp residue. Coldrain spoke without emotion. "You slaughtered a Mechanicus expedition before we arrived. Was that you, or your devil?" Denji blinked, his expression unreadable. "They tried to cut me open while I was asleep. I woke up scared." He paused. "When I'm scared, the chainsaws start." The Inquisitor regarded him like one might regard an unexploded shell, fascinated, wary, reverent. "You are a weapon shaped by terror itself," he murmured. Yet not enslaved to the warp. He turned away, robes whispering across the metal floor. "Perhaps the Emperor placed you here for a purpose." That night, when the ship entered the shadow of a dying moon, Denji dreamed. In the darkness of his mind, he saw Pochita, small, orange, smiling, standing in an ocean of blood. The little devil wagged its chainsaw tail and spoke without moving its mouth. "You don't belong here, Denji. This place eats everything, even you." Denji reached for him, but the sea thickened into tar. He sank, and beneath the surface he saw faces, millions of them, screaming, praying, burning. Their faith was iron, their pain eternal. He gasped awake, chainsaw blades rattling faintly from his arms. The guards outside aimed their hellguns instantly, but Coldrain ordered them down. A fear manifests around him, the Inquisitor whispered to his psyker aide. It bends reality, yet it consumes corruption as if feeding on it. He is neither servant nor sinner. The warp reacts to him like prey. Denji sat on the cold floor, head bowed. The hum of the ship merged with a faint internal growl within his chest, a sound both mechanical and alive. For a fleeting moment, the Inquisitor felt something he had not felt in years. Hope, fragile and dangerous. He turned away before speaking. "Prepare a transfer to the Forge Temple on Vilalia. The Mechanicus will study him under my authority, and pray that what we have found is not another curse." As the ship adjusted course, Denji watched through the observation slit, his reflection merging with the void. He smiled faintly. Somewhere out there, beyond the Emperor's reach, something was still calling to him. A voice that sounded like the echo of a chainsaw starting in the dark. The Saint Judicant descended into the orbit of Vairea, a forge world wreathed in perpetual fire and smoke. From the viewport, Denji saw the planet's surface, vast industrial continents of iron and flame, rivers of molten metal carving through labyrinthine cities. The air itself shimmered with heat and prayer. Millions of voices chanted to the Omnissiah, their hymns carried through the machine hive like the breathing of a living god. The ship docked with a thunderous impact. Servo clamps hissed, chains rattled. The Mechanicus were waiting. Inquisitor Caldrain stood at the edge of the landing ramp, surrounded by robed adepts whose faces were replaced with metal. They greeted him with ritual precision, their voices chanting binary praise. Behind them, the Magos Biologies, Lord Turvik, watched Denji with a hunger that was almost human. His augmetic eyes whirred and clicked as they adjusted focus. "So this is the specimen that bleeds lightning," he murmured. "The Omnissiah blesses us with curiosity incarnate." Denji was escorted through the forge's cathedral corridors. The walls trembled with the thrum of reactors. Incense mingled with the metallic tang of blood. He caught glimpses of things inside glass chambers, bodies grafted with gears, hearts replaced with engines. Everywhere he looked, flesh was a mistake being corrected. The air was thick with heat and whispers. They brought him to the sanctum of experimentation. A massive table of obsidian and steel awaited, surrounded by servo arms tipped with blades and syringes. Turvik's voice echoed through the vault. "We will peel away the veil of mystery, Inquisitor. Whatever animates this creature, we shall find it." Caldrain's jaw tightened. "You will not kill him. You will not kill him. He is property of the Ordo Malleus." Turvik's metallic grin did not change. "Of course not. Death is such a crude limitation." Denji's restraints were secured. The first cut was made. The blade screeched as it touched his flesh, sparks flying like tiny suns. His blood splattered against the servo arms, and the machines twitched. The Mechanicus adepts stepped back in confusion as the steel began to corrode, smoke rising from their sanctified tools. Denji's breathing quickened. He could feel the saws inside him stirring, grinding against the walls of his ribs. Turvik leaned closer, voice full of awe. Magnificent, organic matter fused with machine spirit, yet independent of the Omnissiah's will. "Do you see, Inquisitor? This is heresy made perfect." Denji's body convulsed. Memories blurred, the screaming faces of devils, the warmth of Pachita's voice, the endless hunger of survival. He heard whispers now, deep and metallic, crawling through his veins. "Give it to me," they said. "Give the blood to the god of iron." The lights shattered, alarms shrieked. The floor buckled as a surge of energy exploded from Denji's body. The restraints melted away, and with a roar that shook the chamber, his transformation began. Blades burst from his arms, his head split open into a crown of spinning teeth. The sound was deafening, a chain's growl mixed with the scream of engines. Panic tore through the chamber. Servo skulls fled, slicing through incense smoke. Tech priests fired plasma pistols, their prayers dissolving into screams as Denji tore through them like paper. Sparks rained. Blood painted the walls. A servo arm swung at him and was severed mid-motion, oil splattering across sacred sigils. Turvik tried to invoke a machine can't, his vox howling. "The flesh is weak. The flesh is." His words ended in static as Denji's chainsaw tore him in half. Caldrain watched through the observation glass, frozen between horror and revelation. What he saw was no demon. There was no warp signature, no corruption bloom. Only motion, raw, impossible motion. Chains of steel driven by something purer than hate, something older than fear. Denji moved like hunger incarnate, cutting through creation itself. When the power finally failed, the forge was silent. Only Denji's breathing remained ragged and uneven. He stood amid ruin, the chainsaws slowing to stillness. The fires dimmed around him, their light dancing on his blood-stained skin. His eyes met Caldrain's through the shattered glass. For a heartbeat, the Inquisitor thought he saw regret. Then Denji collapsed to his knees, whispering through the haze. "They shouldn't have cut me. I told them not to." Hours later, as servitors cleared the remains, Caldrain recorded his report in low vox tones. A subject exhibits regenerative capabilities exceeding all known limits, displays no allegiance to chaos or warp entities. The Mechanicus Sanctum has been rendered uninhabitable by psychic contamination, though readings show no trace of the warp. Only resonance. He hesitated before finishing. If this thing is a weapon, it is one neither the Emperor nor the gods intended. In the blackened forge below, Denji slept among the corpses and shattered metal. The chainsaws on his arms pulsed faintly, their teeth glinting in the dying light. Far above, the chanting of the Mechanicus resumed, fearful now desperate. They called it a miracle. Others whispered another name. The flesh that offended the machine god, the fires of the Varelian forge still smoldered when the orders were given. The Mechanicus declared the entire sector heretically contaminated, sealing it beneath quarantine sigils and burning incense thick enough to choke steel lungs. Yet even as the priests chanted their purification rites, Word of what had happened spread through the ranks of the Inquisition. The Inquisition. A creature that slaughtered tech priests and devoured warp energy had been unleashed, and now it was missing. Denji's escape had not been planned. When the power grid failed, containment seals dropped, and the corridors filled with smoke. He stumbled through the labyrinthine cathedrals, guided only by the echo of his own heartbeat. His body healed faster than he could think. The burns on his skin vanished before the next breath. Every surface around him hummed faintly with static, like the forge itself feared him. Inquisitor Caldrain remained on-world long enough to see the aftermath. Dozens of Mechanicus adepts dead, hundreds wounded. Not one sign of warp taint. Yet the readings were impossible, machines melted, holy circuitry rewritten in patterns that resembled living veins. He doesn't corrupt technology, Caldrain murmured to himself. He infects it with life. Hours later, aboard an Inquisition relay ship in low orbit, a message pulsed across the VoxNet. Its seal was unmistakable. Ordo Xenos, Ordo Malleus, and Deathwatch combined. The transmission carried a single command: terminate the aberration. Aboard the strike cruiser Divine Mandate, a kill team of Deathwatch veterans prepared their weapons. The leader, Brother Captain Maltha of the Black Templars, read the briefing with silent fury. An unholy fusion of flesh and demon engine, he said, voice like thunder through his helmet's vox. We shall purge it in the Emperor's name. His squad, Astartes drawn from half a dozen chapters, knelt in prayer, their bolters loaded with sanctified rounds. On the surface, Denji wandered the ash dunes beyond the forge complex. He could smell oil and ozone, but also blood fresh and real. The hunger in him stirred that old familiar ache. He tried to fight it, but the scent of fear in the air was intoxicating. He could feel it even before he heard it, the rhythm of armored footsteps approaching through the storm. The first bolt round struck the ground beside him, detonating with holy fire. Denji turned, eyes flashing red as the Deathwatch descended from the sky in streaks of light. They landed in a semicircle, weapons raised, black armor gleaming like obsidian idols. Creature of the warp, Maltha's voice boomed. You stand condemned. Kneel and your death shall be swift. Denji tilted his head, confused. A warp? No idea what that is, he muttered, flexing his hands. The chainsaws at his forearms twitched, teeth scraping against metal. But I don't kneel. The Deathwatch opened fire. The world became thunder. Bolter shells tore through the air, explosions lighting the wasteland. When the smoke cleared, Denji was gone. One Marine turned, searching the haze, and screamed as a blade erupted through his chest. Denji emerged from behind him, face half-shadowed, his saws roaring. They fought like gods of blood and iron. Denji moved faster than human eyes could follow, tearing through ceramite armor as though it were paper. But each time he struck, the Astartes answered with bolter and blade, reciting litanies even as their brothers fell. Maltha engaged him directly, his chainsword clashing against Denji's own. Sparks filled the air, their twin weapons howling like beasts. You are a mockery of the machine god, the Templar roared. Denji grinned through the spray of oil and blood. I guess that makes two of us. The captain drove his sword deep into Denji's side. Pain blossomed, but it only made the chainsaw roar louder. Denji's head split open into spinning teeth, and he lunged forward, biting through Maltha's pauldron, ripping through holy armor. The Astartes staggered, stunned not by the wound but by the impossibility of it. Denji's body bled, yes, but the blood smoked alive, crawling like tiny red worms across his skin before rejoining him. He tore through the squad one by one until silence fell. Only Maltha remained, kneeling in the ash, his armor cracked and hissing. The captain lifted his eyes to the stars, whispering a prayer. Emperor, forgive me. The devil wears flesh. Then his helm split under the final blow. When Caldrain arrived at the site hours later, he found only wreckage. The remains of the Deathwatch scattered across a wasteland blackened with heat. Denji stood among them, breathing heavily, his chainsaws dripping with blood and oil alike. Yet when the Inquisitor approached, the man did not attack. He simply stared at the corpses, trembling. I didn't want to, Denji said softly. They kept calling me a monster. Caldrain raised his weapon, but his finger hesitated on the trigger. The air around Denji shimmered faintly, distorting like heat haze. Even the ashes of the fallen Marines began to move, drawn toward him as though their faith itself could not escape his gravity. In that moment, the Inquisitor understood what the others could not. This creature was not merely an intruder. He was a flaw in reality, something the warp itself feared. And in the grim silence of the battlefield, Denji lifted his head to the sky and heard it again. The sound of an engine somewhere beyond the stars, revving in answer. The storm that rolled across Karasti's ash plains was thick with the scent of burning ceramite and blood. Denji wandered through the wreckage left behind by the Deathwatch strike team, his chainsaws dragging along the blackened earth, their teeth still wet. The engines in his chest and head pulsed faintly, the rhythm slower now, exhausted, uncertain, almost human. Around him the sky was bruised violet, lit by the distant flashes of orbital bombardments. Somewhere above, ships still hunted him, their auspex arrays whispering his location to anyone who would listen. He did not run. He simply walked as if the war itself had forgotten to end. His reflection shimmered in pools of oil fractured by the tremors of distant explosions. The faces of the dead still clung to him in fragments of thought, voices praying, cursing, begging the Emperor. Every step he took echoed through the ground like a heartbeat trapped beneath the crust of the planet. At the edge of the hive ruins he saw movement, figures descending through the smoke, black armor again, but these bore the sigil of the Templars, not the Ordo, Thu, a crusade force drawn by rumor and by faith. Leading them was a single warrior whose presence stilled the air. His armor was ancient, etched with runes of purity and vengeance. His helm bore the crimson cross of the Black Templars. He carried a relic chainsword whose teeth burned with scripture. When he spoke, the vox carried the gravity of centuries. You are the blasphemy they whisper of, the flesh engine that devours the servants of the machine god. Denji's eyes narrowed. He was tired of being named, categorized, and cursed. I'm just me, he said, voice rough. I didn't ask for any of this. The knight's reply was a roar. Then die as yourself, heretic. He charged, and the two engines screamed as one. The chainsword met the chainsaw in a storm of sparks and sound so loud the sky itself seemed to recoil. Every impact threw molten metal and shredded dust into the wind. Denji blocked, parried, swung back, each strike wild and desperate. The Templars' blows were perfect, guided by centuries of discipline and faith. Denji's were primal, fueled by instinct and fear. They clashed atop a collapsed bridge that spanned a canyon of burning slag. The air shimmered with heat, molten rivers glowed beneath their feet. Each movement felt like an echo from some older war, a rhythm that existed before gods or machines. You wield the weapon of damnation. The knight shouted, forcing Denji back with a flurry of precise strikes. Lay tool of demons, not men. Denji grinned through the spray of molten rain. Funny, he rasped. You sound just like the monsters I used to fight. The Templar drove forward, his chainsword biting into Denji's shoulder, tearing through flesh and bone. Denji screamed, the sound drowning in the mechanical roar that followed. He grabbed the knight's blade mid-swing, his own chainsaw shrieking to life with renewed fury. Sparks erupted between them, the weapons locked, their teeth grinding against each other like rival gods. For a moment they were equals, devotion against defiance, faith against hunger. The bridge beneath them groaned, its metal structure collapsing under the weight of their struggle. They fell together into the abyss below, still fighting, still roaring. They landed amidst the ruins of a manufactorum, surrounded by the skeletons of machines that had once served the Imperium. Denji rose first, his left arm barely attached. The knight followed, his armor fractured, exposing flesh beneath the purity seals. They faced each other again, breathing smoke instead of air. The Templar raised his sword in salute. You fight with fury, creature. If you were human, I would call you warrior. Denji spat blood, wiping his mouth. I guess I'll take that as a compliment. Then they clashed again. The fight became slower now, more deliberate, each strike a prayer and a curse. When Denji finally broke through the knight's guard, the chainsaw bit deep into his chest. The Astartes stumbled, falling to one knee. His helm cracked open, revealing a face that still held its faith even as life left it. Ime the Emperor, forgive me, he whispered. Denji stood over him, chest heaving, sores dripping with blood and oil. For a long moment he didn't move. Then gently he deactivated his sores, letting silence return to the world. The knight's body slumped forward, his chainsword landing beside Denji's feet. He looked at it, then picked it up. The weapon was heavy, balanced, perfect. The moment he touched it, he felt something stir within him, something not of fear but memory. The sound of Pachita's bark echoed faintly in the back of his mind. The sword's machine spirit did not resist him. Instead, it hummed softly, as if recognizing a kindred hunger. Denji gazed at the weapon and muttered, "Guess we're not so different after all." Above him, lightning split the clouds. From orbit, the Inquisition's ships watched through distant scopes, seeing a figure rise from the ruin, half man, half engine, holding both saw and sword, the symbols of two worlds bound in blood. Inquisitor Caldrain watched the feed in silence. "He learns," he whispered. "He adapts." His voice lowered, almost in reverence. "The Emperor help us all if he ever chooses a side." The Manufactorum lay in ruins, its fires reduced to smoldering embers and molten glass. Denji sat amidst the wreckage, motionless, his breath uneven. The chainsword of the fallen Templar rested beside him, its machine spirit humming faintly like a dying hymn. The air around him shimmered, thick with the residue of something unseen. He didn't yet understand that the warp itself was stirring in answer to his presence. His wounds should have healed as they always did, yet this time the flesh trembled before closing. It rippled, pulsed, and then settled with a shudder, as though reluctant to obey. Denji pressed a hand to his chest, feeling his heartbeat change, slower, heavier. Beneath his skin, something new was moving, as if a second rhythm was learning to imitate the first. Above the ruined city, the sky bled red. Warp storms boiled at the horizon, painting the clouds with veins of sickly green light. The storm had begun the moment he killed the Templar. Even the air was wrong now. Sound traveled in waves that made metal weep and shadows ripple across the ground like liquid. Denji rose slowly, the ground trembling beneath his boots. He wandered through the ruins, following a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once, a whispering chorus of voices calling his name. The words weren't in any language he knew, yet he understood them all the same. They spoke of hunger, power, and recognition. The warp had taken notice. At the edge of the Manufactorum, the world tore open. A rift bled light and darkness in equal measure, and from it came things that should not exist. Demons clawed their way through the air, their forms ever shifting, their laughter a blend of agony and desire. Denji froze. The smell hit him first, sweet rot, burning copper, and wet stone. It was the same smell he remembered from another life, when devils had spilled out of hell to claim the world he once knew. One of the demons lunged, its claws stretching like molten glass. Instinct took over. Denji's saws roared to life, and he met the creature head-on. The impact sent out a shockwave that split the ground. Warp ichor splattered across his face, searing through skin, yet his flesh absorbed it, drinking it in like fire meeting oil. The demon's scream turned to laughter, then to silence as its body dissolved into smoke. Denji staggered, panting. His veins glowed faintly beneath the skin, now the same eerie green that filled the storm. He could feel them, the demons watching, circling. The warp was not attacking him. It was testing him. From beyond the rift, a shape began to emerge, taller than any mortal, a shadow crowned with horns of light. Its voice echoed through every particle of air. "A mortal thing," it said, "you bear no mark of chaos, yet you wield its hunger. What are you?" Denji stared at it, his eyes narrowing, teeth clenched. "I don't know," he said, "but I'm not yours." The demon laughed, a sound like 1,000 knives dragged across glass. "All hunger belongs to us, all fear, all desire, everything that bleeds and dreams. Wames, you are flesh of the warp and do not yet see it." Something inside Denji cracked. Memories surged, blood-slick hallways, devils with names like eternity, darkness, and fear. He remembered the endless slaughter, the promises of power he'd refused, and the last time he saw Pachita, smiling through the blood. His heart thundered, and for a moment it felt like two hearts beating out of sync, one his own, one older, alien. The demon reached out, tendrils of light weaving toward him. Denji's saws ignited with a scream, and he struck first. The blow cleaved the air itself, scattering the creature into burning fragments. Its laughter turned into shrieking disbelief as the energy recoiled upon itself. Denji didn't stop. He tore through the demons one after another, his movements wild but purposeful. The warp screamed back, its tendrils trying to reclaim what they had touched. When it was over, only silence remained. The rift closed, leaving nothing but the stench of ozone and blood. Denji fell to one knee, his body trembling. His skin was marked now, thin veins of crimson light traced across his arms and chest, pulsing like circuitry. His reflection in a shard of steel no longer looked human. Caldrain watched the event from orbit, his vessel's auspex near blind from interference. "Agree." His voice trembled as he dictated his report. The subject's energy output exceeded known limits. The warp reacted as though rejecting him. It's as if his existence burns through its fabric. He consumes its creatures, and in doing so, becomes more alive. On the surface, Denji rose once more. He could still hear the echoes of the demon's laughter, distant now, fading into the storm. Yet beneath it, another sound lingered, something smaller, familiar. The faint whine of an engine turning over. He smiled faintly, though his eyes were hollow. "You're still with me, huh?" he whispered to the empty air. The answer came in silence and in the steady, defiant roar that lived inside his chest. The warp storm over Karest Prime began to subside, leaving behind skies the color of iron and a silence too heavy to be natural. Denji wandered through the ruins, his breath visible in the chilled air, his veins still pulsing faintly with that unnatural red glow. He felt no triumph, only exhaustion, but triumph, only exhaustion. The demons he had slain left no corpses, only drifting dust that shimmered briefly before vanishing, as though reality itself rejected the proof of what he'd done. His chest still hummed with the engine's slow rhythm, each beat echoing faintly through the empty manufactorum. Above him the Senjudicant descended through the dissipating clouds, its hull blackened by the warp's touch. Inquisitor Caldrain stood in the hangar as the ship settled onto the scorched surface. Around him, the remaining members of his retinue prepared in silence, stormtroopers reloading their weapons, psychers reciting wards, servo skulls whispering liturgies of protection. None spoke of what had been seen from orbit, yet all knew the truth. The creature had survived the warp uncorrupted. That alone was enough to unsettle every belief the Imperium held sacred. Caldrain stepped down the ramp, his boots sinking into the soot. He found Denji standing amid the dead city, surrounded by melted metal and shadow. The air shimmered faintly around the man, as if reluctant to touch him. For a moment the Inquisitor simply watched, then spoke, his tone low but clear. "You should not be alive." Denji turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "Yeah," he said after a pause. "I get that a lot." They faced each other, silence thick between them. Caldrain studied him closely, seeing both the monstrous and the human stitched together in defiance of reason. "You fought demons," the Inquisitor said, and the warp recoiled. "No weapon of man or god could do that. What drives you?" Denji frowned, his gaze distant. "I don't know. I just don't like losing, and I made a promise to a friend who gave me everything. Guess I'm still keeping it." Caldrain's jaw tightened. "Even a devil keeps his word," he murmured. "You are dangerous beyond measure, but perhaps danger has its use." He gestured, and his stormtroopers approached, weapons half raised. "You will come with me, not as a prisoner, but as a weapon." Denji's chainsaws hummed faintly in warning, but Caldrain didn't flinch. "The Imperium faces nightmares you cannot imagine," he continued. "Worlds consumed by chaos, cities where reality bleeds. The demons you slaughtered here are nothing compared to what festers beyond the veil. If you can destroy them without being touched by their corruption, then perhaps your curse can serve the Emperor's will." Denji tilted his head. "You want to use me. I want to give you purpose," Caldrain replied. "The Imperium may not understand you, may even hate you, but it needs what you are." His eyes glinted beneath the hood of his armor. "A fight for us, and I will protect you from the executioners who would burn your body and your soul." Zingas. Denji looked away, the faint hum in his chest deepening. "And what do I get?" The Inquisitor took a step closer. "A chance to live without running. A chance to fight for something greater than yourself. And perhaps," he added softly, "a way to understand what you are." The offer lingered between them, heavy as the smoke that hung in the sky. Denji's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened. "You talk like you think there's still something left in me worth saving." "No, there is," Caldrain said. "You feel guilt. That alone makes you more human than most I've met." Denji gave a dry, humorless laugh. "You'd be the first to say that." He looked up at the dark sky where the stars flickered weakly through the warp's fading scars. "Fine, I'll help you. But if you try to lock me up again, I'll turn that pretty ship of yours into scrap." Caldrain inclined his head slightly. "Agreed." He raised his hand, signaling his men to lower their weapons. The stormtroopers obeyed, though unease still clung to them. As they approached to escort Denji aboard, the Inquisitor lingered a moment longer, his gaze drifting to the faint green glow that still traced Denji's veins. "You have no idea what you carry inside you," he murmured. Denji met his eyes. "Well, neither do you." Hours later, as the St. Judicant descended into orbit, Caldrain stood at the viewport, watching the dying world shrink beneath him. In the reflection, he saw Denji in the distance, seated in the lower bay, silent, his head bowed. He could still sense the power coiling within him, something vast and wrong yet, paradoxically, pure. The psychers on board avoided him entirely, whispering prayers beneath their breath. In his private sanctum, Coldrain recorded a new entry for the Ordo Malleus archive. The designation, Chainsaw Man, an entity capable of consuming the warp's corruption without taint. Potential weapon against chaos, but risk beyond measure. His will remains his own, for now. He paused before ending the record. I make this bargain not in ignorance, but in hope and fear. The Emperor may forgive me, or damn me for it. Outside the viewport, the warp shimmered like a wound across the stars. For the first time in years, Coldrain prayed, not to be saved, but to endure what was coming. The Saint Judicant broke warp translation over Carthax Prime, a world already drowning in the blood of its own heresy. The Inquisition had received fragmented distress signals, reports of a chaos uprising consuming the hive cities, of corrupted regiments chanting praise to the dark gods beneath a sun that no longer shone. Coldrain stood upon the bridge, eyes fixed on the planet's wounded surface. What had once been a jewel of imperial industry now flickered with crimson fires visible from orbit. Deploy the purgation teams, he commanded, and bring him. Denji emerged from the lower decks, his steps heavy but sure. The chainsword strapped to his back glinted under the dull lights, his expression distant. The stormtroopers flanking him avoided eye contact. None had spoken to him since Veralia. They called him the Butcher Saint in hushed tones, half mockery, half prayer. He ignored it all. The only thing that mattered now was motion, the next fight, the next breath. The dropship descended through a choking haze of ash and warp static. Lightning crawled across the clouds like veins, illuminating the ruins below. When the doors opened, the sound that greeted them was not the wail of civilians, but the chanting of 1,000 heretics. Their voices merged into one hateful prayer that made even hardened soldiers falter. Denji stepped out first. The hive's lower district was unrecognizable. Streets flooded with blood, walls marked with the 8-pointed star. Corpses hung from the hab towers and the air itself shimmered with madness. From the ruins ahead, shapes began to move. Cultists with flayed faces, their weapons carved from bone and rust. Behind them, chaos spawn writhed and howled, their forms ever-changing. "Hold the line," a sergeant shouted, but the first volley of fire was drowned by the answering roar of the enemy. Bolters barked, lasguns shrieked, and the world descended into thunder. Denji moved through it all as if through a dream. Bolter rounds tore past him. Cultists screamed prayers to their gods, but his eyes were fixed on the horde ahead. When one of the mutants lunged, its mouth a tunnel of teeth, Denji's chainsaw screamed to life. He tore it in half with a single swing, the blood spraying across his face. The scent of fear hit him like a drug. He felt the old hunger return deeper than before. Every pulse of his chainsaws drew more than blood. It drew whispers. The warp itself screamed each time he killed. To the Inquisitor watching from behind the front line, it was as if the air recoiled from him. Denji's presence devoured the taint around him, the demonic energy burning away like frost under flame. "Emperor preserve us," Coldrain muttered, witnessing the impossible. The cultists began to break, their prayers turning to pleas. Even the demons hesitated before striking. To them, Denji was not prey nor rival, he was something they could not define. When he carved through their ranks, the ground blackened beneath his feet, and the echoes of his chainsaws drowned the laughter of the warp. A greater demon emerged from the smoke, a creature of brass and sinew, crowned with fire. It roared, shaking the battlefield, and the sky itself split with thunder. The Inquisitor's Vox officers screamed warnings, but Denji was already moving. He charged, the chainswords roaring in unison, meeting the monster's blade with a burst of light that blinded even the servo skulls recording the engagement. The clash echoed across the hive. The demon's weapon shattered on impact, and Denji drove his saw through its chest. The creature's bellow became a shriek as it dissolved, its essence collapsing into ash and sparks. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Then the cultists broke entirely, their faith imploding with their god's death. When the smoke cleared, Denji stood alone in the street. His arms hung limp at his sides, dripping with Ikaran blood. The remaining troopers approached cautiously, their armor scorched and cracked. The Vox crackled with Coldrain's voice. "A ceasefire, the field is ours." They gathered around him silent. No one dared speak until the Inquisitor himself descended, his robes torn and eyes hollow with awe. "You killed it," he said softly. "A being of the warp undone by mortal hands. Denji's breathing slowed. Wasn't much of a god, he muttered. Coldrain stared at the ruined demon corpse, then at the man who had slain it. You have no idea what you've done, he said. You have purified a battlefield by blood alone. Every drop you shed consumes corruption. The warp fears you. Denji frowned, the hum inside his chest deepening. If it fears me, why do I feel like it's getting closer? As the Inquisitor turned toward his ship, his eyes caught a faint shimmer around Denji's body, like heat haze pulsing with faint, unseen motion. Even the ashes of the dead seemed to lean toward him, drawn by something primal. Phew. Coldrain's mind whispered the words he dared not speak aloud. He isn't just killing the warp, he's becoming part of it. Night had fallen over Carthag's prime, though the planet's darkness no longer resembled the peace of absence, but the suffocation of despair. The fires of battle had been reduced to smoldering pits, their smoke rising like the breath of a dying god. Denji sat amidst the ruins of what had once been a shrine to the Emperor, its marble saints shattered, their faces blackened. Around him, the remnants of Coldrain's forces moved in silence, too afraid to look at him, yet too drawn to stay away. The smell of blood hung thick in the air. It clung to him, to his skin, to his chains. Every breath carried with it the metallic sweetness of slaughter. Yet beneath that, Denji could sense something else, fainter, sharper, fear. It threaded through the battlefield like invisible smoke, not just from men but from the very air, as if reality itself had learned to dread it. Within minutes it was over. The creatures had vanished, their screams echoing faintly across the ruins before fading into nothingness. Denji stood alone again, his chainsaws dripping, his chest heaving with slow, steady breaths. Coldrain approached, stepping carefully through the dust. "Did you understand what just happened?" he asked. Denji looked at him, his eyes reflecting the dying firelight. "Yeah," he said softly. "They're scared. But not of dying, they're scared of me." The Inquisitor's throat tightened. "Then we must pray they never learn how to stop being afraid." Above them thunder rolled, not from the clouds, but from the warp itself. The universe had taken notice. The air after battle was still, but it was not peace. Carthag's prime lay in ruin, its sky burning with faint auroras, ghost lights from the warp collapsing upon itself. Denji stood on the cathedral's roof, staring at the void above. The storm had ended, yet something lingered, a resonance that pulsed in time with his heart. His breath came in slow, deliberate intervals, though each exhale carried a metallic tang, as if his blood itself had begun to rust. Coldrain had ordered the troops withdrawn. They feared him now more than the demons they had come to fight. Even the Psykers refused to look in his direction, claiming his aura sounded like screaming metal. The Inquisitor had not argued. He only watched from a distance, recording every movement Denji made, his mind torn between awe and dread. Night deepened. The fires dimmed, leaving the ruins bathed in a dull red glow from the planet's wounded horizon. Denji felt an ache behind his eyes, a throbbing pulse that grew louder with each heartbeat. It wasn't pain, it was memory. His vision blurred, and the world around him bent. The smell of ash was replaced by the scent of dirt and gasoline. The wind became warm. The stars shifted. He blinked, and the battlefield was gone. He stood in a place he hadn't seen in what felt like eternity. A small house, wooden walls stained with oil, a flickering lamp resting beside a rusted chainsaw. On the table lay a half-eaten slice of bread, and beside it a little orange creature with a saw blade sprouting from its head. Pokitita. Denji froze. The world felt fragile, as though one wrong breath would shatter it. Pokita wagged his small saw blade tail and barked, a sound that pierced the silence like sunlight cutting through fog. "Hey, buddy," Denji whispered, kneeling. His voice trembled. "Is this real?" Pokita tilted his head, eyes full of that same warm, impossible trust. "You're far from home," the voice said, not through sound, but directly into his mind. "You've been fighting too long." Denji's throat tightened. "I don't know where I am. Everything's metal and blood and people praying to machines. They keep calling me a devil." He looked down at his trembling hands. "Maybe they're right." Pokita hopped onto his knee, pressing his small body against Denji's chest, where the steady hum of the engine heart echoed faintly. "You remember what I told you," the voice murmured gently. "The world will always fear what it can't control. But you were never supposed to be their devil. You were supposed to be their hope." Denji shook his head. "Hope? I'm covered in blood half the time. I don't even know if I'm human anymore." Pachita looked up at him. "That's because you keep fighting like one." The walls around them flickered, the light dimming. Through the windows, Denji could see the warp storm bleeding through the illusion, colors of impossible geometry pressing against the edges of his vision. The little creature's voice grew fainter. They're calling to you again, Denji. Denji. The things that feed on fear. They think you're one of them. I'm not, Denji said, his voice firm now, almost defiant. I kill monsters, always have. Then keep killing, Paquito whispered. But don't forget what you are. The Chainsaw Man isn't just hunger or rage. You're a promise made from love and pain. Don't let this world change that. Denji reached out to touch him, but the image began to break apart. Pochita's form scattered into sparks, his voice fading with the wind. Don't let them take me away from you again. The world snapped back. Denji gasped, falling to his knees on the cold stone. The stars of Carthax returned, their sickly light spilling through the broken roof. His chest throbbed painfully, the sound of the engine now louder, rougher, as if two hearts were fighting for the same rhythm. He pressed his palm against his sternum and felt it, the faint echo of Pachita's heartbeat beneath his own. Coldrain appeared at the edge of the cathedral, his voice steady but distant. You collapsed, he said. For a moment, every sensor on the ship registered an anomaly. The warp bent inward around you. Then it stopped. Denji looked up slowly. Yeah, I saw him, he murmured. My friend. The one who made me what I am. The Inquisitor hesitated. The devil heart you spoke of. Denji nodded. He said they're calling me one of them now, the warp things, but I'm not. His tone darkened. I'll never be. Coldrain studied him carefully. Perhaps the warp believes what it fears. Perhaps in its hunger, it's trying to claim you as its own creation. Denji rose, his shadow long against the ruined wall. Then I'll keep giving it a reason to be scared. The wind picked up again, carrying the distant echoes of chanting from beyond the ruined hive. Coldrain turned his gaze toward the horizon, where new fires were blooming. Then prepare yourself, Denji, he said quietly, because the warp never forgets what it fears. Denji looked up at the burning sky, his heart pounding like a war drum, the hum of chains within his chest blending with a faint memory of a friend's voice. The scent of fear filled the air again, thicker now, coming from far beyond this world. And somewhere, deep in the Imperium, something vast and unseen whispered back. The fires on Carthax Prime had not gone out when the first signs of corruption appeared within Denji himself. It began as a tremor beneath his skin, a subtle quiver that echoed the hum of his heart engine. At first he ignored it, thinking it nothing more than exhaustion. But by the time the St. Judicant broke orbit, the trembling had become a pulse, a vibration that rippled through his veins like the rhythm of a living machine. He sat alone in the containment bay, staring at his reflection in the polished steel of the bulkhead. His face was pale beneath the flickering lights, his eyes rimmed in red. When he blinked, he thought he saw movement beneath his skin, a faint distortion that rippled like liquid metal. He pressed a hand to his chest. The engine inside purred softly, but there was something new beneath it. Another sound, faint but deliberate, like whispering teeth grinding against one another in the dark. Coldrain watched him through the reinforced glass, his mind heavy with calculation. The Psychers had refused to remain aboard. Even their wards could not endure the aura surrounding Denji anymore. Machines malfunctioned in his proximity. Vox channels filled with static that sometimes formed words, fragments of laughter, screams, and once a voice repeating his name. The Inquisitor documented it all, though his own faith began to tremble beneath the weight of what he witnessed. When he finally entered the chamber, the air was dense, vibrating faintly, as though it too feared to remain still. "We haven't spoken for hours," Coldrain said carefully. Tell me what you feel." Denji didn't look up. His hands were clasped, fingers twitching as though caught between two impulses, one human, one something else. "It's loud," he muttered. "It's like there's something inside me trying to crawl out, not Patrita, something older." Coldrain's voice was steady but low. Can you describe it?" Denji's gaze finally met his. "It doesn't speak. It just remembers," he hesitated. "I see things that aren't mine. Wars that never ended. Faces I've never seen. It's like I'm dreaming someone else's nightmares." The Inquisitor felt the weight of those words settle like lead in his chest. "The warp is a sea of memory," he said quietly. "You've absorbed fragments of it. Each demon you killed left a scar inside you, and now the warp wants them back." Denji laughed weakly, though there was no humor in it. "It figures. I eat monsters, and now they're eating me from the inside." He stood, and for a moment the lights dimmed. The floor beneath his feet trembled. "We can still control it. I just need to keep moving. Keep fighting." "Denji," Coldrain said sharply, "if you lose control, you won't be fighting the warp, you'll become it." The man stopped, breathing heavily. For an instant his silhouette flickered, his outline distorted like heat rising off metal. "You think I don't know that?" he snapped. "You think I want this?" His voice broke. "I didn't ask to be a weapon. I just wanted to live." Coldrain's hand hovered near his pistol, but he didn't draw it. "Then fight it," he said. "A fight for that small piece of yourself that still remembers who you are." Denji's eyes softened, and for a brief moment he looked almost human again. But then his expression changed. Pain rippled through him like a wave. He doubled over, clutching his chest. The hum of the engine grew louder, its rhythm erratic, violent. The chainsaws embedded in his arms flickered to life, teeth spinning of their own accord. "Get back!" Denji gasped, his voice ragged. "It's happening again." Coldrain shouted for containment protocols, but the machine spirits of the chamber screamed in defiance, refusing to obey. The lights burst one by one as a surge of energy erupted from Denji's body. The air warped, reality bending inward. For a moment, Coldrain saw the warp bleed through, a vision of impossible depth. Rivers of blood, oceans of screaming faces, and in the center of it all, a single figure standing beneath an endless sky of flesh and teeth, Denji's reflection. The Inquisitor could only watch as the man writhed, his body shifting between flesh and machinery, his veins glowing crimson. From his back erupted phantom chains, transparent, shimmering, reaching toward the ceiling like tendrils of living light. His voice, when it came, was layered, two tones, one human, one ancient. "They're inside me," he whispered. "They're me." Coldrain drew closer, shouting through the chaos. "You are not them, Denji. You are not their god." The roar that answered him was deafening. The containment field shattered. Denji dropped to his knees, chainsaws carving grooves into the deck as he fought to restrain himself. Every movement tore at his own flesh, but he forced his will through the madness. "I won't let them win," he growled, "and not again." And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The chainsaws stilled. The lights flickered back to life. Denji collapsed, breathing heavily, smoke rising from his skin. Coldrain approached cautiously, the stench of scorched metal thick in the air. Denji's voice was barely a whisper. "It's gone quiet, for now." Coldrain knelt beside him. "You fought it back." Denji looked up, his eyes hollow yet alive. "Not for long." He glanced at his trembling hands. "Every time I kill one of them, it becomes harder to stay me. It's not a fight anymore. It's a war." Coldrain placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we'll fight it together. We'll fight it together." Denji's gaze met his, uncertain but resolute. "You don't understand," he murmured. "The war isn't out there anymore." He tapped his chest where the engine pulsed beneath the skin. "It's in here. It's in here." And for a moment, the sound of that engine seemed almost like laughter. Low, distant, and not entirely his own. The days that followed blurred into a haze of silence and smoke. The St. Judican drifted above Carthax's orbit, its wounded hull lit only by the red glow of emergency sigils. Below, the planet burned without prayer. In the lower decks, Denji remained in isolation, his body wrapped in suppressor cables that hummed with the energy of null fields. Even the air around him shivered faintly, as though his presence distorted gravity itself. He slept little. Each time he closed his eyes, he felt the warp pressing against his thoughts, an endless tide whispering his name through the voices of the dead. Coldrain had stopped sending guards. The last ones who tried to reinforce containment had fallen to madness, their hearts bursting from sheer psychic overload. The Inquisitor now visited him alone, entering the chamber cloaked in wards, the door sealed with the weight of ritual, and still it barely held back the hum that filled the room. "Readings fluctuate by the hour," Coldrain said, voice quiet but firm. "The warp around you grows quieter when you're awake but violent when you dream. You are not just resisting it anymore, you're bending it." Denji didn't answer. His eyes were half-lidded, fixed on the steel floor. The chains on his arms trembled faintly, not from movement, but from something deeper, an unseen vibration running through his bones. "I don't know how long I can keep it back," he said finally. "It's learning. Every time I fight it, it gets smarter. Feels like I'm wrestling my own reflection." Coldrain stepped closer, studying him like one studies an ancient weapon whose purpose has been forgotten. "You said once that this power came from a promise," he reminded, "that it was born from something human. If that is true, it can still serve the Emperor's will. Denji looked up, his expression unreadable. You keep saying that. Serve. Obey, fight for him, but your Emperor, he's not here, is he? Just a corpse on a throne plugged into a machine. The words struck like a knife. Coldrane's hand tightened around the rosary at his waist, but his voice remained steady. The Emperor is not dead. His will endures through his servants, through faith, through the Imperium itself. A faith doesn't stop monsters, Denji muttered. A blood does. Then perhaps, Coldrane said quietly. You are his answer to both. He placed a small relic before Denji, a fragment of an ancient cogwheel engraved with the dual sigil of the Aquila and the Omnissiah. The machine god and the Emperor are one, the Inquisitor continued. They understand the necessity of tools. And you, Denji, you are the sharpest blade I have ever seen. Denji's gaze lingered on the relic. Something deep inside him stirred, an echo of voices, priests chanting, machines praying, and in the distance the faint hum of the throne itself. The warp responded to the symbol like oil meeting fire. For a moment, the chamber walls glowed red, the air vibrating with unseen power. Something's calling, Denji whispered. It's not the warp, it's different. Coldrane's Vox implant crackled. Reports streamed through the channel, alarms from orbit, cries of incoming fleet. The Chaos Armada that had fled the warp storms was returning, drawn to the disturbance Denji had created. A dozen warships loomed beyond the atmosphere, their weapons blazing. Carthax would burn again before the sun rose. Coldrane turned sharply toward the door, his tone commanding. Arm the ship, prepare planetary defenses. Deploy every lance battery we have left. But Denji rose before he could finish. Friggy. The null chains shattered like glass. No, Denji said. They're not here for you. They're here for me. Coldrane stared as the chainsaws on Denji's arms ignited, their teeth spinning with a low, steady growl. If you leave this ship, you'll die. Denji smiled faintly. A maybe. But if I stay, everyone else will. The Inquisitor's voice broke through the alarms. Denji, don't waste it, he said, stepping toward the airlock. That faith of yours, maybe I'll borrow some of it for this one. He didn't wait for permission. The airlock hissed open and the void rushed in. Denji stepped into it unarmored, unafraid. The roar of his chainsaws cut through the silence of space as he fell toward the burning world below. The warp shimmered around him, bending light, bending truth. The Chaos Fleet's auger readings failed, their sensors blinded by the impossible, a human form descending like a comet of fire and teeth. He struck the surface like a meteor, the impact shaking continents. From the crater, a single sound rose, the grinding roar that had once terrified devils and now made the warp itself hesitate. The Chaos warbands converged, their tanks and demons swarming toward the epicenter. The first to see him died before they could scream. Coldrane watched from orbit, every lens fixed on the storm below. The planet's atmosphere fractured with light not from weapon fire, but from something deeper, a resonance between faith and fury. The Mechanicus aboard whispered prayers of awe as readings spiked beyond comprehension. The Vox carried fragments of Denji's voice, distorted through the static. For someone like me, maybe this is the only kind of prayer I know. Then the feed went white. When the light faded, half the Chaos Fleet was gone. The rest fled into the warp, leaving trails of shattered matter and silence. The surface of Carthax burned, reshaped by the explosion that followed his strike. Coldrane fell to his knees on the bridge, his face lit by the dying glow of the world below. Through the static, one sound lingered, the faint, rhythmic growl of a chainsaw echoing beneath the Emperor's golden silence. For 3 days, the void above Carthax Prime was filled with the soundless thunder of aftermath. The Chaos Fleet was gone, their vessels either consumed by the warp or shattered into drifting carcasses. What remained of the planet glowed faintly beneath the St. Judicant's orbit, a scar of molten light carved into the darkness. Denji had not been seen since the descent. The scanners found only static. The Vox carried nothing but the faint hum of a mechanical heartbeat fading into the noise. Coldrane refused to leave orbit. He stood alone at the observation deck, robes torn, eyes hollow from sleeplessness. Around him, the ship's engines purred in low mourning. "We saw him fall," whispered one of the surviving officers. "We saw the explosion. No one could survive that." Coldrane said nothing. His hand tightened around his rosary until the metal links cut his palm. "No one," he murmured, "except him." The Mechanicus priests aboard the vessel began calling the event a miracle. The data recordings showed patterns that defied logic, lines of light forming sacred geometry across the atmosphere, echoing symbols of the imperial Aquila. To them, Denji's fall was not a death, but a sanctification. They began to chant hymns of the Omnissiah's fury, claiming a new saint had been born of machine and man. Caldrain silenced them with a single order. "There will be no worship," he said coldly. "Not yet." Still, the whispers spread. Across the lower decks, the soldiers spoke of the Chainsaw Saint, the man who burned half a world to save it. Some said they heard him screaming during the bombardment. Others swore they heard laughter. None could agree on the truth. On the fourth day, a signal appeared. Weak, fragmented, buried beneath the electromagnetic storms that now crowned Carthax. The Vox officers worked in silence, filtering interference until at last a single voice cut through the static. "Don't come looking for me." Caldrain froze. The words were unmistakable. Denji's voice, distorted but alive. The channel fluctuated as the signal grew stronger. "I'm still here," he said. "Or maybe part of me is. I don't know what I am anymore." There was a pause, filled with the low, rhythmic growl of engines. "But it's quiet now." For the first time, the noise is gone. "Denji," Caldrain said into the Vox, his voice trembling with restrained hope. "Where are you?" Everywhere came the answer, softer now, almost lost beneath the hum. "The warp isn't screaming anymore, it's whispering. And when it whispers, I can understand it. It's afraid again." Static consumed the rest of the message. The signal died. Caldrain stood unmoving. The crew watched him, waiting for orders, but none came. At last he turned toward the viewport, gazing at the dying light of the planet below. "He's alive," he said quietly. "But not as we knew him." In the weeks that followed, Imperial recovery fleets arrived to reclaim what was left of Carthax. The planet was declared purged, its atmosphere sealed under quarantine edicts. The Inquisition's archives recorded the event as anomalous cleansing operation 331K. No mention of Denji appeared in the official reports, but among the soldiers, a legend began to spread. They said that sometimes in the void between transmissions a sound could be heard, a faint grinding echo that rose and fell like the turning of distant gears. Astropaths claimed it resonated through the Imperium itself, distorting the warp currents near Terra's outer defenses. Ships passing through the Sol system reported strange phenomena, sudden silences on the Vox machine spirits whispering prayers without command, and the lingering scent of oil and smoke in sealed chambers. One night, as Caldrain knelt before the shrine of the Emperor aboard his ship, the incense flame flickered and went out. For an instant, the chamber was dark, and in that darkness he heard it, the unmistakable rev of an engine. Not loud, not near, but distant and patient, like something waiting. He bowed his head. "If you can hear me," he whispered, "then may the Emperor guide you still." The Vox crackled once, faintly though no one had touched it. A single phrase bled through the static, barely audible but clear enough to chill the blood. "Tell him, I'm still cutting, I'm still cutting." The transmission ended, leaving behind only the silence of deep space. In the years that followed, pilgrims began to gather at the ruins of Carthax, where the ground had cooled into black glass. At night, when the wind moved through the valleys, the stones would sing, a grinding, rhythmic sound that echoed through the hollows like the memory of machinery. Some called it a curse. Others called it proof of a miracle. On Terra itself, deep within the cathedrals of the Adeptus Mechanicus, a rumor began to circulate among the tech priests, a story of an echo beneath the golden throne, a sound no human ear could hear but which made even the machine spirits tremble. They called it the voice of the unbound engine. And though no record could confirm it, some swore that in moments when the Emperor's psychic light flickered, the faintest sound could be heard beneath his eternal throne, a low, steady rumble like the turning of distant chains. Centuries passed, and the name Carthax Prime faded from Imperial records. Its coordinates were sealed by decree, its history buried under 100 layers of silence. Yet across the Imperium, the whispers never truly stopped. They spoke of a sound that came and went like a storm, an echo heard by navigators as they crossed the void, a faint grinding that no machine could trace. Some said it was interference from the Astronomicon. Others said it was something older, moving unseen between the stars. Say, among the Inquisition, Caldrain's name became a curse. His ship, St. Judicant, was found adrift decades after the cleansing of Carthax. Its crew vanished, the Vox repeating one phrase again and again, "He's still cutting." The vessel was declared heretical and cast into the sun. Yet the transmission never ceased. It echoed from ship to ship, spreading like a song the warp itself couldn't drown. In the grim void beyond Ultramar's reach, Chaos warbands learned to fear the silence. Fleets that ventured too deep into the dark began to vanish without trace. Sorcerers who reached into the Imperium for guidance reported visions of something vast moving beneath the warp's surface, a storm of light and teeth that devoured both demon and void spawn alike. The gods of chaos themselves grew restless. Their servants no longer dreamed in laughter but in the sound of machinery, a steady, brutal rhythm that filled their nightmares. On a ruined moon orbiting the Eye of Terror, a cult of Khorne prepared a blood ritual to summon their patron's avatar. The priest's blade hovered over the sacrifice when the chanting stopped. The air had changed. The warp flickered, its crimson glow thinning into grey mist. The blood on the altar began to boil. Then they heard it, faint at first, like the whir of a dying engine. The noise grew, vibrating through the bones of the world until the walls themselves screamed. The priest dropped his blade, his eyes wide with horror as the shadows took shape. Out of the distortion stepped a figure clad in ruin and fire. His skin was etched with scars that glowed like molten iron, his chainsaws humming softly, their teeth dripping with something that wasn't blood but memory. The cultists fell to their knees. Some prayed, others ran. It made no difference. When the first blade roared to life, the sound alone silenced the warp. When it was over, the altar was gone, the moon split in two. The demon that had been called to life never formed, its essence devoured before it could take shape. The survivors whispered one name as they fled back into the eye, Chainsaw Saint. From then on, the warp changed. Whole sectors reported sudden stillness where storms once raged. Demons would vanish mid-manifestation, their forms shredded into dust. Even the Great Rift dimmed for brief moments, its color fading to the dull gray of oil and ash. The Emperor's priests called it divine intervention. The Inquisition called it anomaly. The servants of chaos called it what it was, fear. One by one, the demons began to tell a story whispered through the Imperium. A warning passed from one abomination to the next. They spoke of a man who had walked into their realm and refused to kneel, a creature who fed not on souls or faith, but on the warp itself. They said he was neither saint nor monster, neither mortal nor god. He was hunger given purpose, an engine of denial in a universe built on endless want. They said his heart was forged from a devil's promise, and his name was the sound the warp hated most. Far across the stars, in a place where time no longer flowed, Denji stood on a plain of shifting dust. Around him stretched the broken ruins of things that had once been demons, now silent as fossils. The warp's horizon pulsed faintly like a dying sun. He breathed in the air, or what passed for it here, and exhaled. The sound was not breath but the faint rev of his chainsaw heart. It had been lifetimes since he last saw a human face. He no longer needed food or sleep, and yet he remembered them. Memories of warmth, of laughter, of the tiny orange creature that once made